Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, if I was to say data intelligence, I know some of you out there will be thinking, oh, not another meaningless data term. But actually, data intelligence was a term recently coined by IDC to mean a system that delivers trustworthy, reliable data. And in doing so, it helps companies build thriving data-driven cultures. So today, I've invited Steve Neate from a company called Alation onto the podcast to discuss how Alation actually started out life as a data catalogue company, which is a bit like your classic Argos catalogue for over here in the UK, but for metadata. In other words, very accurately and clearly categorising data about data, which enables incredibly fast data recovery across organisations. So we're going to put all that in a language that everyone can understand and learn how companies such as Vattenfall and Marks and Spencer's have been able to use data intelligence, a bit like Google, to build a real-time glossary that helps define standard terminology and ensure that all of their users have a common understanding of critical business terms. So if this is an area that you would like to make sense of, buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the UK, where you can join me and Steve Neate in conversation about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Neil. I'm delighted to be here. Appreciate the invitation. My name's Steve Neate. I'm the General Manager for Alation here in EMEA. My responsibility is to build and manage Alation's business across Europe. And we've done that successfully in the last few years. And the reason for doing that is to help our customers to become more data-driven and to be successful in data intelligence.
And I think that's one of the big changes this year. I think traditionally, especially in big corporations, it was always the loudest voice in the meeting room that made the decision. So moving away from that and towards data-driven decisions is so important. But before we talk about Alation and everything that you're doing there, I always like to find out a little bit more about my guests and where they got where they are today. So I've got to ask, how did you get here and what is your origin story?
Yeah, I suppose like many people, my career wasn't that well planned.
Yeah.
In fact, I trained as a mechanical engineer at university. And when I came out of uni, the choice at the time really was, one of the key choices was to go into the oil industry or the emerging computer industry. However, in the early 80s, there weren't many IT companies around. I did use a Sinclair ZX81 during my course, so I was familiar with it. Actually, I didn't like it that much at the time. It involved queuing up to use terminals, but I did take the decision that computing was probably an industry that I would do well at, and it was certainly developing at the time. So I applied to various graduate roles in what were systems houses at the time. I don't know if you remember that far back.
Yeah.
And successfully got a graduate placement at a company called Software Sciences. Turns out, however, I'm not very good at programming. I much preferred being in front of customers. And having spent some time doing a pre-sales type of job, they actually offered me a junior sales job because that's what I enjoyed. And I really haven't looked back since. I love understanding how technology can help businesses be more successful. And I've worked for a number of software companies, including Oracle, SAP, SaaS, and a few startups along the way. 5 years ago, I joined a company called Calibra and moved into the data space. And then a year ago, I moved to Alation and with the mission of helping grow our business in Europe. So far, so good. We've grown the team 400% in a year and grown our revenues 300% year on year. So it's all looking good.
Wow, that's an a great story, and also great progress there, especially considering we've had 2 years in a global pandemic, and the world's a very different place. So kudos to you. And one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today was to talk a little bit more about data intelligence and how it can help companies build a thriving data culture. But can you explain to listeners what data intelligence actually is, just to bust any myths out there or misconceptions, and why it is so useful to organisations that are going through a data transformation right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think data intelligence is interpreted in different ways by different people. But for me, data intelligence is a platform that helps employees in any company to have easy access to data, reports, business intelligence, AI, everything about data and its context that will help them make better and more informed decisions. And as you said, rather than relying upon the loudest voice in the room or gut feel, moving towards a data culture where everybody makes decisions based upon the data that's readily available to them.
And I'm curious, how do you see data intelligence evolving, or how have you seen it evolve? And what are some of the big trends to watch over the next year, would you say?
Well, data has historically been the responsibility of IT. It's been somewhat of a back office function. Today, data really needs to be out in the front office, in the hands of businesses, helping those people make really important and informed business decisions. To make that happen, it has to be incredibly easy to find and access. And with that in mind, I think customers will continue to demand really easy access. People get used to the Amazon experience, the Google experience, Wikipedia, and they expect that consumer-based experience in the enterprise. So that's what I expect to see, further developments in ease of use, user experience, potentially the use of natural language processing to make it really, really accessible. And if you don't have that ease of use and accessibility, people won't use it. You won't be able to build a community around your data, and you won't build the data culture that everybody wants.
And I'm also interested in learning more about Alation's data catalogue. But for anyone listening that's just outside of this world and also wants to learn a little bit more about it, can you just offer an overview on exactly what a data catalogue is and what the connection is between a data catalogue and data intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. I think there are many definitions of what a data catalogue is, but fundamentally, the Alation data catalogue is a massive index. It's used by very large organizations to unleash the power of their data. We get their data all organized for them so they know exactly what data they have, where it lives, and whether it's reliable and trustworthy. In big companies, data comes in all shapes and sizes and locations, but it's a big problem for them. Our customers include people like Pfizer, Munich Re, NASDAQ, Vattenfall, Finnair, Cisco, all large, complicated organizations who want to get the most out of their data. I believe a data catalog is the foundation for any data strategy, and without it, you can't have data intelligence.
And I do suspect that most people listening in the workplace or in any organisation, any industry, have seen what happens when you put garbage in and you end up getting garbage out. It's something that I think everyone's experienced at some stage. But for anyone that hasn't, can you expand on why it's so important for organisations to be able to trust their data? And how does that trust in data help to develop, a data culture?
Yeah, you're right. Trust in the data is really important. Do I really know where this data has come from? Do I really know what it means? Is that consistent across the organization? Does it have the right and appropriate levels of quality? Fundamentally, can I rely upon this data to make those important decisions? I think we've all been in situations where we've turned up a meeting with one set of data and somebody else has turned up with another set of data, and we're trying to project the number of customers that we have, and we get different answers. A data culture will be rapidly undermined if there's no trust in that data. So by implementing a data intelligence strategy, by deploying a data catalog, you can start building up that trust so that people will genuinely start making business decisions based upon the data that they have in the organization.
And there's so many trends going on at the moment, especially around data and trusting that data, and especially when we're bringing in things like automation and artificial intelligence, and it's so important to have healthy data. But what trends excite you right now?
Well, I'm a consumer myself,
Yeah.
and I get really excited about that consumer experience. You know, those apps that you get on your phone that you really enjoy. Anything that makes information more accessible and more valuable. I think that applies both to the consumer and to the enterprise worker. At the beginning of the pandemic, actually, I started using my mountain bike again and recorded my routes and plotted my new routes on Strava. And one of the features that I noticed in that consumer experience was something they called their global heat map. And it was a way of visualizing in a aggregated and anonymized fashion where everybody else had been. And this was really valuable to me because I was plotting some new routes and I kind of trusted the routes where other people had gone. And so it really changed my cycling habits. And what's fascinating is Alation uses very similar techniques in its data catalog to let users know what's the most popular data, who are the top users of that data, which really helps draw people in and delivers some real insight to those users. So there's a real crossover between the consumer experience and the experience for business users. And I think that's a major trend. People expect in business now a similar experience and similar insight from the apps that they use on their phone every day.
Yeah, I completely agree. There was a great quote from, I think it was an IBM chief about 6-7 years ago, and she said that the last experience that somebody has somewhere becomes the next expectation for what they want everywhere. And it's also good, I think, that we're no longer talking about B2C and B2B, because we expect that same experience no matter where we are, don't we?
We absolutely do. We absolutely do. And I think enterprise applications sometimes feel as though they're forced upon the users. And the users, you know, people who have to use the system, they use it just because they're told they use it. I think as consumers, we want to use the apps and have the experience that's best for us. We really want an exciting and engaging experience. And people now demand that in their enterprise applications. Otherwise, the enterprise applications don't get used and don't get adopted. And that's often an issue, I think, in this space, is driving adoption around the use of data. If you don't have that, you have no chance of achieving your data cultural goals and ambitions.
And bearing in mind everything that we've talked about today, what's next for Alation, and what's your big focus now in EMEA?
Yeah, I think we're just getting started. Yeah. There's huge demand in the market, despite the pandemic and everything that's going on in the world. In fact, I think it's increased demand. Operating remotely as we have been for the last 2 years, people want to collaborate around data. They need to collaborate around data. They don't have the opportunity to stand around the water cooler and ask questions about, where do I find the best data? Can I trust this data? What does this business term mean? They need a single place that they can go to quickly and easily uncover that information, to get the information and the data that they need to do their job. So I think we're just getting started. Every company is wrestling with the volumes of data that they have today. Every company in EMEA wants to be more data driven. Every company wants to be successful with data culture. So our focus and my focus over the next 12 months is to help our customers to successfully achieve their business objectives by using trusted and very reliable data. We'll continue to grow here in EMEA to serve the clear market opportunity. We're hiring, so anybody listening to this who's looking to change career, come and find me and we can have a conversation.
Oh, I love that. I'll add the links to the show notes. But before I let you go, we started the podcast today talking about your origin story, what put you on this path. But I'm now going to ask you, what inspired you along your journey? Was it a song, a movie, book, or anything? Is there a story there that you can leave us with and maybe leave everyone listening on a bit of an inspirational note?
Yeah, I think there were many along the way, and this was quite a hard choice, actually. But on reflecting on it, I've spent the last 10 years of my career building and managing teams, high-performing sales teams and customer success teams. And there's one book that I keep going back to. Actually, it's a book called Winning by Sir Clive Woodward. And for those who don't know who Sir Clive Woodward is, he was the England rugby union coach who took the England team to World Cup success in 2003, quite a long time ago, but we still remember it very well. In the book, Clive talks about the techniques that he's used, both in sport and business, to really build and motivate successful teams from very talented individuals. There are many good things in there, but there's one thing that I tend to use every day, and it's a technique that he just calls teacup. And that stands for thinking clearly under pressure. And if you remember the cup final, you'll remember the last few minutes where the pressure was on, the scores were level, and Johnny Wilkinson successfully got the drop goal, which enabled England to snatch that famous victory. But for me, thinking clearly under pressure is something that I try and inspire my team with, so that they're cool, calm and collected no matter what's going on around them.
Brilliant. Absolutely love that. And I will get that added to our Amazon wish list for other international listeners to check out as well. And before I let you go, though, for anyone wanting to dig a little bit deeper on all the topics we've discussed today, contact your team or just find out more information about Alation, what's the best starting point? Yeah,
well, they can certainly research things on our website, www.alation.com, or contact me directly at steve.neat@alation.com.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today, learning more about your story, the great work you're doing at Alation, and also the term data intelligence is being considered one of the most, I think in the area of data management, is often mentioned in Gartner, which maybe we can expand on in a future episode. So I'd love to stay in touch with you and keep this conversation going, but just thank you for sharing your story today.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Love chatting with Steve, especially about this ability to both better understand and trust data across an organisation, and learning more about how it's leading to the creation of communities around data where people are able to simply reach out to each other and share information. A culture where people know and trust the data that they're working with. And of course, why this has led to data intelligence being considered as one of the key areas of data management by analyst firms such as Gartner. But if this is your area of expertise, I'd love to add you into this conversation too. So as always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram @NeilC.Hughes. Keep your messages coming in. And remember, if you leave a rating and review, send a screenshot and I will give you a shout out in a future episode. But we're out of time today, so thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.